It was October 18th in the year 1767 that Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon completed their survey of the boundary between the colonies of Pennsylvania and Maryland, as well as the areas that would eventually become the states of Delaware and West Virginia. The Penn and Calvert families had hired Mason and Dixon English surveyors to settle their dispute over the boundary between their two proprietary colonies, Pennsylvania and Maryland. In 1760, tired of border violence between the colony's settlers, the British Crown demanded that the parties involved hold to an agreement reached in 1732. As part of Maryland and Pennsylvania's adherence to this royal command, Mason and Dixon were asked to determine the exact whereabouts of the boundary between the two colonies. Though both colonies claimed the area between the 39th and 40th parallel, what is now referred to as the Mason-Dixon line finally settled the boundary at a northern latitude of 39 degrees and 43 minutes. The line was marked using stones, with Pennsylvania's crest on one side and Maryland's on the other. When Mason and Dixon began their endeavor in 1763, colonists were protesting the Proclamation of 1763, which was intended to prevent colonists from settling beyond the Appalachians and angering Native Americans. As the Britons concluded their survey in 1767, the colonies were engaged in a dispute with the Parliament over the Townshend Acts, which were designed to raise revenue for the empire by taxing common imports, including tea. 20 years later, in the late 1700s, the states south of the Mason-Dixon line would begin arguing for the perpetuation of slavery in the new United States, while those north of the line hoped to phase out the ownership of human chattel. This period, which historians consider the era of the New Republic, drew to a close with the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which accepted the states south of the line as slaveholding and those north of the line as free. The compromise, along with those that followed it, eventually failed. "100 years after Mason and Dixon began their efforts to chart the boundary, soldiers from opposite sides of the line let their blood stain the fields of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, in the southern states' final and fatal attempt to breach the Mason-Dixon line during the Civil War. 101 years after the Britons completed their line, the great U.S. of A. took a step towards righteousness and admitted men of any complexion born within the nation to the rights of citizenship with the ratification of the 14th Amendment. On October 18th in 1867, the U.S. formally took possession of Alaska after purchasing the territory from Russia for $7.2 million, or less than 2 cents an acre. Indigenous people settled the unforgiving territory thousands of years earlier. The Alaska Purchase comprised 586,412 square miles, about twice the size of Texas, and was championed by William Henry Seward, the enthusiastically exceptionist Secretary of State under President Andrew Johnson, our nation's 17th president. Russia wanted to sell its Alaska territory, which was remote and difficult to defend. It's reported that the sale was out of fear. You see, Russia would rather sell their territory to the U.S. than risk losing it in battle with a rival such as Great Britain. Negotiations between Seward and the Russian minister to the U.S., Eduard de Stockel, began in March 1867. However, the American public believed the land to be barren and worthless and dubbed the purchase Seward's Folly and Andrew Johnson's Polar Bear Garden. Some animosity toward the project may have been a byproduct of President Johnson's own unpopularity. As the 17th U.S. President, Johnson battled with radical Republicans in Congress over Reconstruction policies following the Civil War. He was impeached in 1868 and later acquitted by a single vote. Nevertheless, Congress eventually ratified the Alaska deal. Public opinion of the purchase turned more favorable when gold was discovered, of course, in a tributary of Alaska's Klondike River in 1896, sparking a gold rush. Alaska became the 49th state on January 3rd in 1959 and is now recognized for its vast natural resources. Today, 25% of America's oil and over 50% of its seafood come from Alaska. It is also the largest state in area, about 1/5 the size of the lower 48 states combined. The name Alaska is derived from the Aleut word Alaska or Alyeska, which means great land. Alaska has two official state holidays to commemorate its origins. Seward's Day, rightly so, observed the last Monday in March, celebrates the March 30th, 1867 signing of the land treaty between the U.S. and Russia. And Alaska Day, observed every October 18th, marks the anniversary of the formal land transfer. In my opinion, Alaska has lots of undiscovered treasure or resource, whatever you want to call it, and it's sparsely populated. Nice place to, I don't know, get an idea. It was October 18th in the year 1972 that the Clean Water Act becomes law. After centuries of reckless treatment of American rivers, streams, lakes, and bays, the Landmark Act institutes strict regulations on pollution and quality controls for the nation's water for the first time in its history. The 60s had been marked by some truly horrific revelations regarding water pollution. A 1968 survey revealed that pollution in the Chesapeake Bay resulted in millions of dollars of lost revenue for fishermen, while a 1969 study found that bacteria levels in the Hudson River to be at 170 times the legal limit. The same year, pollution from local food processing plants killed 26 million fish in one lake in Florida, the largest fish kill on record, and an oil slick resulted in an infamous fire on the Cuyahoga River near Cleveland. When President Richard Nixon, our nation's 37th president, established the Environmental Protection Agency in 1970, it was clear that water pollution would be one of its top priorities. Though Nixon was generally very proactive on environmental issues, he vetoed the Clean Water Act, even after it sailed through both houses of Congress on the grounds that its price tag was too high. The legislature overruled his veto the following morning, and the bill became law on October 18th in 1972. Good. The Clean Water Act mandated the protection of any waters in the country within a significant nexus to navigable waters. It established a framework for identifying, licensing, and enforcing standards on originators of point source pollution, contamination stemming from a single point like a factory or sewage treatment plant. It also contained many other provisions for finding, regulating, and cleaning up water pollution, giving most of these responsibilities to the recently created EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency. Since the CWA took effect, levels of pollution have greatly decreased, although many environmentalists believe it did not do enough to control non-point source pollution, the kind of contamination that cannot be traced back to a single origin. Though the Clean Water Act clearly had a positive impact, a high percentage of American waterways still do not meet the water quality standards it set forth.
Information documented and divulged on this audio file can be verified on history.com.